Welcome to Green Dot Daily. I'm Maria Marino, live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. Today on the show, we'll get NHL trade deadline thoughts and picks for tonight from Nick Martin. But it's a huge day for both men's and women's college basketball, so we'll start there. And these are the marquee matchups on the men's side. Rutgers visiting number 3 Purdue. Rutgers plus 14.5, receiving 53% of the handle. 73% of the handle is on the under 139.5. And then later, number 21, Washington State at number 4, Arizona. 70% of the handle is on Arizona minus 12.5. 75% coming in on the over 150.5. And what a day as we bring in our director of predictive analytics, Sean Koerner. And Sean, you have a theme for your props today.
So apparently today is National Margarita Day, which I'll be celebrating later, maybe after the show, we'll see. But I'm going to be on 3 rebound overs. I love today. So I'm saying today should also be National Rebound Day.
Yes.
You're all welcome to celebrate with me on these 3 just props I love.
I like the idea of celebrating some rebounds, cashing the boards, if you will. All right, so let's get into it. What's your first pick?
So my first one's from this SMU Florida Atlantic game. I'm going with Vlad Golden of Florida Atlantic to go over 5.5 rebounds. It's minus 130, but I love it anyway. I bet this like up to minus 200. But you know, Golden's only grabbed 2 boards in back-to-back games actually. So I expect him to bounce back, and this is a good buy low spot for him. You know, SMU's one of the better offensive rebounding teams in the country, so I would expect FAU to, you know, want Golden near the rim. You know, he's 7'1", and scoop up as many defensive rebounds as possible, and you know, prevent SMU from excelling on the offensive boards. And you know, SMU is very good defensively, but they're below average at allowing offensive boards, so that could be, you know, combined for, you know, Golden kind of missing more shots inside, but more likely to scoop up some offensive boards. So that's why our projections love him today. We're projecting him closer to 7.3 rebounds with a 70% chance of clearing 5.5. So that's why I'm not too worried about the extra juice here at minus 130. I love this one.
Averaging 6.5 on the season as well. Who else are we rooting for on the glass?
Yeah, so next up would be the Washington Arizona State game. And I'm going with Keon Brooks of Washington to go over 6.5 rebounds at minus 122. This is just a really good spot for Brooks to get a ton of rebound opportunities here. You know, Arizona State does an excellent job of not turning the ball over. Plus, they're a poor shooting team, so that's just going to result in a few extra bricks, you know, for Brooks to potentially get boards from. And, you know, Arizona State is one of the worst offensive rebounding teams in the country, and Brooks gets the highest percentage of defensive rebounds for Washington, which means he specifically will be the one who benefits the most from this matchup tonight. So projecting him for way more rebounds of this, 8 exactly, with a 67% chance of clearing 6.5. So give me his over 6.5 rebounds at minus 122.
Yes, we want Brick City, and he's averaging 6.8 on the season. And you have not 1, not 2, but 3. So who's the last that we're rooting for to be crashing or cashing the boards?
Yeah, one more for National Rebound Day, and it's this Rutgers Purdue game. I'm going with Braden Smith of Purdue to have more than 5.5 rebounds at plus 120. Talk about Brick City. This is just an excellent spot for Smith to get some boards because Rutgers is one of the worst shooting teams in the country. So they're going to likely brick a ton of shots tonight, especially going up against this Purdue defense. You know, Zach Edey should get a ton of rebounds tonight, as always, but Smith should also benefit as well because he typically is the second most likely Boilermaker to get defensive rebounds. I think they just like having him clean up on the defensive side, just get him the ball and push the ball up the court. So we're projecting him for 6.5 rebounds with a 65% chance of clearing 5.5. So getting this at plus odds is even better. But love Braden Smith over 5.5 rebounds here.
Yes, and he's cleared this in his last 4 games. Okay, so end of the night, you're celebrating all of these rebounds. What kind of marg are you going with?
Definitely mezcal. I might get creative. I might go with like a cactus flavor one.
Wow.
That's my new favorite. Like cactus flavored margaritas with mezcal
Good
with a
to
ton of
know.
bricks while watching a ton of bricks and rebounds to boot.
Yes, indeed. And on the rocks, of course.
On the rocks, of course, with salt.
Maybe I will celebrate along with you. Hope so.
Celebrate both holidays, please.
Yes, I don't want to discriminate against any of the holidays. Sean Koerner, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Now, here are the latest odds to make the men's Final Four. No surprise at the top with UConn, Purdue, and Houston under 2-1. The big surprise is Iowa State, tied for 8th at plus 425. Projected by many to finish in the middle of the Big 12 in the preseason, the Cyclones sit just 1 game out of first place in the conference. With that, we welcome in my co-host, just kidding, college hoops expert Mike Calabrese, but you've been on the show so much, so it sounds fitting to say that. But last year, number 1, number 2, and number 3 seeds, none of them in the men's Final Four. So for the casual fan, can we see another team like, say, 9-seeded Florida Atlantic make a Final Four run as a mid-major?
I think it's absolutely possible. At this point, when you look at bracket matrix, there's a solid chance that we don't see a single mid-major as a top seed through the 1 through 4 lines. But that doesn't mean that they're drawing dead, because when you look at what makes some of these teams special, there are 4 mid-majors in the top 30 of both offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. You have FAU, Dayton, Princeton, Indiana State on the offensive end. Indiana State, for those who have not watched any Missouri Valley basketball this year, they are an incredibly fun team to watch. They push the tempo, they score in the mid-80s, and they lead the country by a wide margin in what's called rim and 3 rate. So they take the 2 most efficient shots on the floor. They either take it up from 3-point range or they get to the rim. So they're a team that can definitely make a run, and they have the offensive firepower. They also share the basketball incredibly well. It's not a one-man show there. Defensively, you look at teams like San Diego State, St. Mary's, New Mexico, Colorado State, all top 30 in KenPom. St. Mary's is the team I circle here because they pair their elite defense with a really slow, plodding way of playing hoops. And that can throw teams off. You know, teams that like to score in transition, they like to have that fluid basketball. When they get into a half-court grind, that's where St. Mary's thrives, and that can pull certain teams out of their comfort zone. So matchup dependent, I could also see the Gales making a surprising run this March.
That would be fun. And by the way, can we just take a moment to appreciate our graphic and the little Cinderella shoe above you at the moment?
I like it a lot. I wore my FAU Out of the Way shirt just to, get the Cinderella vibes going. They're not as fancy. They're not as, I would say fancy as Sean's margarita order. We're not talking about mezcal or cactus flavor. They're more, original, Tate's margarita mix kind of thing. They'll get it done. They're gritty. I'll see them playing in the second weekend.
Yes, and we know Sean, a big fan of the Owls today as well. Moving on to your picks. Important matchup in the Pac-12. Washington State just a half game back of Arizona. Who do you like tonight?
I mean, it's no secret the Pac-12 has been a whipping boy. They've been a joke of power conference basketball this year. The Mountain West is probably going to send more teams to the tournament than the Conference of Champions. But that doesn't mean you should be sleeping on Washington State. This is the same Cougs team that upset Zona on the Palouse, just a couple weeks ago. They strung together wins in 10 of their last 11, and they do it because they're an elite rebounding team. And when Isaac Jones, their power forward, elevates his game, as he did in the last meeting with Arizona, he's a crucial X factor that just takes them to the next level. So if he plays well in a game like this, I can see Washington State hanging around, even though this game is down in Tucson. The thing about it here, though, beyond just the Cougars plus the points, it's going to be a contrast of tempo and style. Arizona wants to play at a lightning pace. They're top 10 nationally in tempo, according to KenPom. Wazoo, 277th. So it's all about who wins this push and pull battle. And I would consider, for that reason, a same game parlay. If you take Washington State, think about parlaying them with under the 150.5.
Like that idea. And Washington State, back on January 13th, albeit at home, upsetting Arizona by 3. What else are you betting tonight?
Go down to the Sun Belt for a team that's been a bit of a gambling darling this year. Troy has just been covering numbers left and right, and now they get a revenge spot against Arkansas State. They were up by just about 10 points with a minute to go in the first meeting, but then they went into a deep freeze in the second half. They suffered a 9-minute stretch where they scored just 4 points against the Red Wolves. And that's pretty rare for this Trojan team because according to Haslametrics, they are the second most consistent team in America. They don't go through these prolonged droughts. You basically, what you see is what you get when it comes to the Trojans. They remain elite on the offensive glass, and they're really good at forcing turnovers, over 14 per game, which is 41st in the country. So I think they exact a little revenge here. I'm happy to take the plus money at plus 120. And the Sun Belt is a conference that doesn't really have formidable home court advantages. So the fact that they're traveling to Jonesboro, it's a long trip. It's about 5 hours from Troy, Alabama. Other than that, there's not a lot to worry about in this spot. So I'll go ahead with the slight underdog.
I like how you said they not only got cold, they got into a deep freeze. That's always a concern. But Arkansas State, 8-6 in conference play. Troy sitting in third at 11-3 in the good old Sun Belt. Mike Calabrese, thanks as always.
Thank you, Maria. I'm going to go and find myself the fanciest margarita I can drink and hope for a little 3-point regression from Arkansas State, 8 for 17 in the last meeting. I want them to be in a deep freeze. All right, I'm going to go find my blender, get a deep freeze margarita going.
Cheers, my friend. To women's hoops, Caitlin Clark is back at it tonight, a week after breaking the all-time scoring record with a career-high 49. Across 4 games in February, she's averaging 36.2 points and 12.5 assists per game. Her season averages rank first in the nation, and she's shooting 39% from deep. Our women's hoops analyst, Dano Mataya, is back on the show. So a well-rested Caitlin, dare I say, on the road at Indiana. Her points prop is up to 34.5. Would you consider betting this?
For me, it's just a lean. I think she probably gets 35 in this game. That's the most she's ever scored against Indiana. It's a tough game. I know they blew Indiana out, but Indiana's good at home. Assembly Hall, famous. And I mean, like you said, with her assist, she's finding everybody. So I could see a big assist night for Caitlin. I don't want to take a chance, but if you're feeling frisky and you lean it, I lean the over.
Yeah, I mean, this should be a closer game. Indiana actually is third in the conference. And Caitlin, by the way, has scored 35 or more in 5 of her last 7. So teetering on that number. But another star in this matchup is Mackenzie Holmes for Indiana, coming off that disappointing loss at Illinois. Her points prop 20.5.
I love it. I think that's an over for sure. She's hit this in 5 of 7 at home. And the 2 that she didn't hit it in were kind of blowouts for Indiana. 5 and 7 home, Big Ten games at least. So I expect this to be a little bit closer because the competition is very high with, third-ranked Iowa coming in. So that's their best weapon. She's been the most reliable player in Indiana all year. They want to feed her early and often, and she's getting the free throw line a lot, not making as many as she should, but I think the opportunities are going to be there for her to at least get to 21.
Yeah, they need her to be competitive here. Iowa favored by 4.5, but you're going to stay away from the spread and bet the total.
Absolutely. I mean, I could see this going both ways with the spread. I do like Iowa. I lean it, but I do love the over. The over is cashed in 7 road Big Ten games for Iowa. Caitlin puts on a show everywhere she goes. I don't know if it's the farewell tour thing. She wants to give everybody a last taste, but they're putting up points like crazy. And the last 3 games or last 2 games at Indiana both went over this number. I like 164.5. I played up to 165.5. Wouldn't be surprised if we get another shootout like Indiana had against Michigan State that I think ended 93-90, 94-90, something crazy. But Indiana shoots a lot better at home. They score a lot more at home, especially coming after a loss. I expect them to put up points, and we basically know what we're getting with Iowa.
For sure. One of the most explosive offenses in the country. And both of Iowa's conference losses this season have come on the road. One of them was to Ohio State. The Buckeyes also in action tonight. Who you got in this one?
I can't say enough positive things about the Buckeyes this year, and especially lately. 5-0 against the spread in their last 5. They're at the top of the Big Ten Conference, setting up for an epic showdown at Iowa at the end of the year if they win out and Iowa wins out, basically playing for a Big Ten title. Now, Penn State, ever since losing Tay Holiday, has just been rough. 0-5. I think they covered one spread that was at Iowa, which was like plus 19.5. They barely covered that. Losing games at home, which is not good, but they're getting demolished. And I think Tay Holiday is a big piece of that, being a senior guard who has been awesome on both ends of the floor. So you're running into a buzzsaw with Ohio State. I know they're on the road, but I trust this team a lot. I laid 9.5. I think I take it up to 10.5. They're winning they're covering their spreads by a margin of 13 points on average the last 5 games.
Yeah, they have looked so good and just playing like a veteran team. All right, Dano, this is going to be a fun slate. Thanks so much for joining.
Absolutely.
To the NHL, Auston Matthews has been flat out getting it done for the Maple Leafs. He's got 27 points on 18 goals and 9 assists in his last 14 games. He also leads the league with 51 goals. Toronto is 9-2 in their last 11. As we say hello to our hockey expert, Nick Martin. So Toronto, 3rd in the Atlantic right now, 5th in the Eastern Conference, but Matthews on track to be one of the highest scorers of all time. So how do they take advantage and build a successful team around him before the deadline?
Yeah, their GM, Brad Treliving, had at one point spoken out and said they weren't going to be very aggressive at the deadline this year. I think that they owe it to this team to go for it. It doesn't really make sense with their window not to. So the clear need for Toronto is defense. And I think that's actually a leg up on them relative to some teams because there's actually quality defenders that can come into their lineup and make a difference. And whether or not they'll end up getting them or not, we'll see. They're poking around on Chris Tanev and Noah Hannafin. Those guys would be a big upgrade. And I actually think that Toronto would have some actual aspirations of winning the cup if they brought them in. Their big question mark, kind of goaltending and defense, but they do have some edges. So I think that there's some arguments as to why they can actually compete this season. I look at who they'll probably get in the first round in Boston, and I think the Bruins are going to have a clear edge on the back end and in goal, but their weakness relative to Toronto and the other top teams in the East is always going to be down the middle. They have a weak core of centers. And the thing for me is it's not that they're lacking in depth or top 6 centers or useful guys. It's that they don't have an elite guy like a Matthews or an Aho or an Alexander Barkov. And those guys aren't out there. So I don't really see what trade Boston makes for like any of the names that are out there, like Casey Middlestat, Adam Henrique. I don't see how those guys put you in a better situation, really. I still think that Charlie Coyle, Morgan Geekie, and Pavel Zacha are better than all of the guys out there. So that's the concern for me for Boston. I'm not saying they can't win, but I think people are maybe overrating a little bit what they can actually do entering the deadline. I think the game changers this deadline would be goaltenders moving and Markstrom and Saros, and the Bruins don't need that. And with defense moving like Hannafin and Tanev. So yes, Boston are a really, really good team, but the advantage for Toronto will clearly be coming from Auston Matthews down the middle, who should be able to dominate any line matchups he gets versus the Bruins.
Well, the Bruins, 2nd in the league standings, and then another potential cup contender, last year's champs, the Golden Knights. Do you see them having the ability to make something happen?
Yeah, the Knights are going to be a really interesting watch because everyone's seen the way that the last 4 cup championships are won. All those teams had LTIR guys down the stretch, and then you come into the playoffs, you can add cap and play with basically just a better salary than anyone else can offer. Vegas now has Mark Stone and Jack Eichel on LTIR, so they have a ton of space to be active. I don't think it's that clear who they can really bring in to round out what's there. But the interesting thing, too, is once they get those guys back, they're still a full-blown cup contender. So I think they're a team to watch if their price really drifts. They're really not playing well right now. But with that said, they're kind of still priced right with the other top teams in the West. So it's not like you're getting much betting value to try to target them doing something here. So yeah, that's kind of the thing with the Knights right now. I'm watching is like if this number drifts, if they play really bad, say lose tonight again, maybe you want to buy because all the important pieces are still going to be there this year.
Okay, well, let's get into tonight's games. I know you have a couple of picks for us. So where are you going for your first pick?
Yeah, for my first pick, I'm going to go with the Lightning and Capitals game to go under 6.5. I think that it's kind of going to be, it's a bit of a contrarian look. And I just think that the way the Capitals games have been trending total wise is not what they're going to be moving forward. This is one of the league's worst offenses. I don't really see that changing considerably in time. I think the games like their last outing versus the Devils, where they won 6-2, are kind of going to be the outliers. And that the way they're going to need to win is with lower scoring, tight checking defensive play. Charlie Lindgren's been really good in goal, and I think the Caps can insulate him reasonably well. They've also played a lot of better offenses recently. They looked good defensively versus Vancouver and Boston. They hung around versus the Panthers on Friday. So I think they're capable, and that their recent play is kind of giving us a 6.5 where I don't see it. It's still a really big game here for the Caps. If they win it, they're actually only 5 points back of Tampa with 3 games in hand. So not to say they close that gap, but from their perspective, that's bulletin board material. And typically in that kind of a game, we do see tighter checking. I think that's the main thing that Spencer Carberry's done well for the Caps this year, is brought in good structure and having them compete well with a good organized game plan. And then I look at Tampa. They're defending more effectively since they've got their guys back, and their brutal performances on that front recently, like the 9-2 loss to the Panthers, those have all come against top offenses. So I still believe in their upside. And the other note I'll cite in there too is they've come when on back-to-backs. Tampa have been horrible on back-to-backs, and when Johansson's gone in goal. So I think there's kind of a couple of recent trends that are helping give us a total of 6.5 here, when we might not otherwise see one. So yeah, I like the under in this game.
Well, Tampa coming off 2 straight losses, they're going to be motivated to defend. And as you mentioned, the Caps averaging just 2.48 goals per game. All right, what else do you like?
Yeah, the other one I like is Rickard Rakell to go over 2.5 saves in the Penguins Canadiens game. I also don't mind Caden Primo to go over his shot or save prop as well from the Canadiens. So I'll slide that out there. If people saw me track that in the app first, I wanted to save one for the show so that hopefully the number will hold. But Raquel he got moved up to the top line with Jake Gensel's injury, and alongside Crosby and Rust, and they've been looking really good. They've been really dominant. He's had 11 shot attempts. He's also playing on the top power play. He's had over 20 minutes in both games. And you look at tonight's game, odds-wise, odds makers are expecting a smash spot, right? Looks like the Pens should be able to clean up, but they've been really bad in these kind of spots. They really have had a tough time. Every game, it seems to be the same story. They control more of the play. They have a hard time putting teams away. Montreal's been excellent in that kind of a game script. They've been really good at just sheltering their goalies and trying to go against the run of play and find a way to succeed with less of the puck. So I wouldn't be surprised if this game ends up being closer than the prices suggest. I don't necessarily like Montreal, but I'm a little less worried about a blowout than the numbers suggest. So that's good for Raquel, hopefully seeing a lot of ice. And then with that said, the Habs have been giving up 35 shots on goal for 20 straight games. They're horrible defensively. They don't own much of the puck. So they have the goaltending and the avenues to hang around, and the Pens have just somehow found a way to let every team stay in the vast majority of games with them, which is great for this. I think it's still too low on Raquel here. I think we want to keep buying while he's on the top line. So yeah, give me over 2.5 shots.
Well, I appreciate you saving a pick for us exclusively here on Green Dot Daily, but definitely still follow Nick Martin in the Action app. Nick, thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
Remember, any picks we give out here on the show, like the ones you just heard from Nick, you can easily reference by following Green Dot Daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. That's all for Green Dot Daily. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks so much for hanging with me, and I'll see you again tomorrow at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube channel and the Action app.